Welcome to Dr. Lotte's Science with Soul, the podcast that transcends the boundaries between science and spirituality. Prepare to be uplifted, transformed, and awakened to create a path to healing your own life physically, emotionally, and spiritually by bridging the gap between science and soul. Do you ever feel waves of anxiety, guilt, or sadness without knowing why? What if these struggles didn't start with you, but were passed down through the generations? Hi, I'm Dr. Lotte Valentine, physician, psychic medium, and ancestral healer. And I'm inviting you to my brand new self-paced online course, Healing the Mother Wound, Rewriting Your Emotional and Energetic Blueprint. Discover how ancestral patterns and hidden emotional imprints shape your life and how you can break free. Are you ready to reclaim your power and step into a new paradigm of healing? Join me now. Your journey starts today. Welcome to Dr. Lotte's Science with Soul. Today's guest is Charlie Bynar, who is an author and international artist whose portrait of David Bowie was featured in the Victoria and Albert Museum's 5-year traveling exhibition, David Bowie Is. After the tragic loss of her son, she founded Isaac's Art Foundation and created art exhibits in his memory, including one at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. In 2021, she published her first children's book, Charlie and the Rainbow Trout. Through the Darkness marks her debut in narrative nonfiction, an inspiring and deeply moving story of love, loss, and resilience. Through the Darkness, a story of love from the other side, explores the unbreakable bonds between loved ones even beyond death. On April 18, 2017, Charlie's world shatters when she unexpectedly loses her only child, 16-year-old Isaac. Overwhelmed by grief, she begins investigating the circumstances of his passing, suspecting medical negligence. As she navigates this painful journey, she starts sensing Isaac's presence from the other side, a spiritual realm where he reconnects with his ancestors. Together, they reach across time and space in an effort to guide and protect her. Soon after, Charlie receives another devastating blow. Her husband, Chris, is diagnosed with terminal cancer. Pushed to the edge, she embarks on a quest for understanding, seeking guidance from a world-renowned psychic medium, Allison DuBois. Based on true events, Through the Darkness is a powerful testament to the enduring connections between the living and the departed. Thought-provoking and deeply heartfelt, it serves as a roadmap for those navigating grief, offering hope and healing and a renewed sense of purpose. To learn more about Charlie, please visit charliebynar.com. It's such an honor to have you as a guest today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
And we met in a more of an unusual way. Not the usual way that I meet my podcast guests. So I know you would love to share that story and how we met. So can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Of course, that's great. I was actually listening to one of your podcasts yesterday, and I can't remember the man that you were interviewing, and but he spoke about Gary Schwartz and his afterlife studies. And Gary Schwartz, so this is a very how you connect all the dots to where I met you. So it's actually very there's a many steps in here, which is kind of cute in a way. So Gary Schwartz was studying afterlife stuff, and he was interviewing mediums at, I think it was University of Arizona. Anyway, one of his people that he was interviewing was Allison DuBois, one of the mediums, and she ended up doing an interview with Nathan Castle, and then Nathan Castle interviewed you, And then I learned about you being a medical intuitive from Nathan Castle, from all those dots. And then I was like, I had been struggling with, at the time, I didn't know what. And I thought, I got to talk to this woman because she's going to help me. And one of those little knock knocks on the door with the, the universe trying to get your attention. And so that's how I ended up calling you up and scheduling that first meeting with you. And I'm so grateful because guess what? You were right. And I had been struggling for a year and a half in bed, major chronic fatigue, like very debilitating, where I would go to bed for maybe 14 hours a day and I would wake up just as tired as I was when I went to bed. And my head was pounding and I was losing all my hair and I would have migraines all the time. My stomach hurt. I had like everything was wrong. I had no idea what was going on. Every doctor told me, go here, go there, do this, do that. Anyway, you finally got it right. You did after a year and a half. And I am so grateful that you did. Thank you. I'm finally getting better.
Right. I love that. I love that story. And it's so predictable of our medical system. It's so difficult if you don't have a regular diagnosis, something we have an easy test for, and we can get a diagnosis and we get medication or we get put on the path to healing. But so many people fall through the cracks, just like you did. And you're a nurse yourself. You come from you work in healthcare, and still it's so difficult to find answers when we don't fit the regular criteria when we go to a doctor.
Right, because it doesn't make, because as we were talking earlier, like if you don't put all the pieces together, if you're only analyzing one small piece, a snapshot in somebody's life, that doesn't tell you about that person's life. And when you only, sorry, my throat, it's from the dysautonomia. So anyway, I'm sorry. But if you only do one snapshot of a person's life, it doesn't tell you who they are. And it's the same thing with when you have a really complex health situation, you have to put all the pieces together to figure out what's going on. You cannot just do piecemeal. Piecemeal does not work. And unfortunately, a lot of the primary care providers or specialists don't put all the pieces together. They just have their one little piece, like just the heart guy does the heart stuff, the lung guy does the lung stuff. And when you need to put them all together, especially with the nervous system, because the nervous system affects the systems from the top down. Oh, hi, little puppy dog. Is that your little doggy?
Yes.
Great.
He wants to be on the camera.
Yeah, no, that's cute. So anyway, if you don't put all those pieces together, the patient just has a really poor outcome. And it's really devastating.
Yeah,
so I'm
so
grateful for the work that you do, because honestly, it was one of the huge steps that helped me. You said the word dysautonomia and I had written it down. And then of course the universe knocking on the door again. When I first met you, I was like, her name's Anne Charlotte. And I was like, my name is Charlotte Ann. And I thought, that cannot be a coincidence.
It is so right. It's like divinely guided in the end. It is kind of funny how
well,
the
it
puzzle pieces fit together.
Perked my interest. I was like, maybe there's something to this. I need to really listen.
But it's true. I mean, that was so divinely guided how you came across me. You listened to this one podcast and then led you to Father Nathan's podcast, right? I mean, it's just so divinely guided.
Steps,
and
right?
then for you to do that, I mean, I've had people tell me, I asked my spirit guides for help. I opened my computer this morning and for some reason your video popped up on YouTube and I don't even know why, right? And then they found me. But it's really interesting how I'm going to say we are all so divinely guided. And that was, the divine guidance for you was to follow that trail. And you so beautifully did. You said, no, this is it. There's something here.
Yeah, kind of my go-to in the evening is before I go to bed, I try to be, thoughtful about the day, I suppose it is, and grateful of what's in the day. And I ask for guidance. And so I say, I'm not going to ask for specifics or anything. If you have any guidance, let me know. I'm going to do my very best to listen. And so I'm always like trying to like pick up the breadcrumbs, but if you don't listen, then you don't make those little connections. And that's why I think that was kind of cute, because I had to like ting, 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 and then I finally found you.
Right? I love that, but it's so true, right? How we have to listen to our guidance. And I know you're going to share lots of stories about that, because we're going to be talking about your book next. And you just had this book published, Through the Darkness, a story of love from the other side. And what inspired you to write this book, and what message do you hope the readers will take away?
Well, the inspiration was my son, who passed at 16. He was the love of my life. I mean, I just love that little kid more than anything. He's the other half of me. And we were just soulmates. There was just something really very special about our connection, and it still is there, and it still will always be there, because the ultimate message from the book is death is not the end. There is actually no death, and there's no separation, because, well, there's no death, basically. I came from a perspective of, and then the other thing that I really wanted to do with the book was by writing it down, I had so many questions, because at the time I was a very disbelieving person of the afterlife, like you. I mean, it took you like a decade or more to like finally get like, okay, I'm on board.
Yes. In the beginning, it was just, no, it's just a coincidence. No, it can't be.
Right. And
Until
I
you
had
get the proof, and then you want more proof and more proof.
Right. So when really big things happen to you and they just leave you with great big questions marks, it's like you just have these huge question marks that you really just need answers to. And I had so many of those that I thought, well, one of the ways that I could figure it out is write it down. Because when you write something down, it forces you to actually understand what you're writing. Often when you're thinking about something, it's like, oh, it could be, and you really aren't tying down what you're really thinking. And writing it down forces you to really understand your thoughts. It's kind of an interesting process. So writing the book not only served me to help process the grief, but it was also my way of honoring my loved ones on the other side. Isaac, Chris, my gang on the other side, all the peeps on the other side. There's so many of them. I have so many angels and guardian angels that I'm so grateful. And so, but I didn't know that, I didn't know that some time ago. And then of course, I also wanted to help other people through this very difficult journey of loss, because it can just devastate you and leave you in the dark, and hence through the darkness, not in the darkness. So it's about it's kind of meant as like a roadmap through the darkness to a place of renewed hope and purpose in life, and to find your way through it, because lots of times you just get stuck in that quicksand. And it's understandable that you can that a real traumatic loss, like the loss of your child or a husband or a wife or someone that you really love, can leave you. It's natural to be left in a very difficult place, because you've just suffered that loss. But it's important to then kind of gain your footing and decide to move out of that dark place and start living again, or to engage in life. You don't want to stay in the darkness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that, in the book, you describe that journey from devastation to renewed hope and purpose. Can you share more about that transformation and what helped you find meaning through that grief process?
Okay, well, some of those big question marks that I was talking about was part of the way that I ended up going, that transition, forced the transition, because very shortly after Isaac passed, and he died due to medical negligence. We were just talking about medical negligence and medical errors, the third leading cause of death in the United States, per Johns Hopkins. He suffered brain injury at birth, and struggled his entire life from a brain injury that could have been prevented had the medical team been present. And then ultimately, since he had a brain injury, as you know, brain injuries often result in seizures, and seizures kill lots of people. And my son was just one of those 250,000 people that die per year from medical errors. Shortly after Isaac crossed, and like I said, his bond and I we were thick as thieves. It was before he was born, I had a premonition that I was going to have this little kid, this messy hair with little messy brown hair, this little boy. I always knew about him before he was born. And so that's another one of those little things. It's like, it was a premonition. It was like, no, that was part of that multiverse that I just had that little image stuck in my head somewhere. And it was like, it was a little gift there for me because I just knew about him before he was even born. But anyway, so when he died, he knew I was in trouble, like deep trouble. Because when you come from a perspective of death is the end and that's the end of that, I mean, and then you lose your only kid. I mean, what do you have to live for? For me, I was like, to just live in misery every day wasn't going to work for me. But so I think Isaac knew that I was in deep trouble. And he started getting hold of me 2 weeks after he died. And it flipped me out. I mean, I was like, what? The first time was a dream visit. And I had never, ever had a dream visit before. And so I didn't know what they were. So these were all these big questions. The first dream visit was, I heard him in my mind. I couldn't see him, but I knew it was him. It was like all noisy, like a normal dream. And then it was like clarity. It's just like a window opens and it's like clear. And then I heard his voice and he whispered in my ear. And I heard him say, I miss you. And it was his voice. I could hear it. And I was like so startled. I woke up like in a panic. And I know, of course, I told my husband, and he was like, oh my God, my wife's going crazy. She's talking to her dead son. And then that's the story begins. It's like he's disbelieving, and I'm like, no, that was really him. That was his voice. I heard his voice. And then it sets you on this course of questions. And then I had 4 dream visits in total. And I needed answers to those. And then other things kept happening. There was lights that would go on and just weird stuff that was happening with me. And so I just started putting all these pieces together, like everything was knocking at my door. And I'm like, no, that can't be. Or are you sure? And, all the questions and doubt and all that stuff that you got to get over. But then one thing that happened, which I thought was really interesting, is I tried to answer some of the questions myself by really digging into science and religion. And I found some really interesting stuff in both of those arenas, but they still didn't quite convince me. I mean, it's like, oh, that's helpful. That's good. Yay, sort of. But I just still didn't quench my thirst. It wasn't answering the questions I had. Is my son still alive? Will I ever see him again? Is he okay? That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. That's what you want to know. And so I investigated science. I found this guy named Robert Lanza, who had written Biocentrism, a very interesting book. It was all about consciousness going from one now at death. Our consciousness just moves from one moment to another. It's not destroyed. I mean, consciousness is the constant. It's not the other way around. And so I thought that's a really interesting perspective. And it was all about entangled particles and how entangled particles are, like an atom has particles and it's made of, and a particle can either be matter or a wave, depending on if it's been observed, the observer thing. And anyway, I read all this stuff and I started to put pieces of this together, which is really interesting. And also, even if you are just reading about these things, it gives you something to do while you're processing grief. So that's a good thing, instead of just like, it was, I found it as a constructive part of the process was just to investigate. And then, and then of course I read from different religious texts or non-religious texts like Buddha, it's not a religion, philosophies. And I found lots of interesting things about that. And then, but I still wasn't satisfied. I still was like, yeah, those are great ideas and that's wonderful. And I still just needed more. And so I was like looking and looking. 2.5 years go by. Now I'm like 2.5 years into Isaac's death, and it's still chasing me. His death always felt like it was chasing me for some reason. Like I was just running and running and running and running. And I just look around and there it is. It's just chasing me. And I was just so tired. But I still had to just run. And, but one day I went to go visit my sister, Teresa, who was, she's my stone. She's my rock. I couldn't get through life without her. I love her to death. But anyway, so I'm in my grief moments and everything. She picks me up, dusts me off, keeps pushing me down the road. She's that kind of lady. And which I'm so thankful for. But she's like, well, why don't you go see a medium? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't even know. That wasn't in my head either. I just didn't process stuff like that. Like, why would you go see a medium? Anyway, so she says, well, why don't you go see a medium? And I said, well, somebody else, 2 other people have told me that at work. And so then it was like one of those universe knocking at the door again. It's like 3 people have told me to do this now. And so I thought, well, I better listen. Maybe I got to listen to these little messages eventually. And so I had made an appointment to go see this one lady down in Sedona. And then when I saw my sister Teresa, I went and saw Allison. When I went and saw Teresa, she said, why don't you go see Allison DuBois? She's the medium from the TV series Medium. And I go, yeah, but that's not based on a real person. You can't like figure out where somebody's buried from picking up a dead photo, can you? Anyway, so apparently you can. So, yeah. So, but that was all like, what? And so this wasn't in my reference point, And so anyway, I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. I've investigated science. I've investigated religion. I might as well go see this medium because I got nothing to lose and she might have some answers. And I don't know, who knows? Maybe you can talk to the dead. Sounds kind of crazy, but let's give it a try. I had an open mind, but I was very skeptical, right? Anyway, and so I went and saw Allison, and that changed my life. I absolutely walked out of that meeting with her knowing Isaac was alive and well. Here is one thing that happened that morning, and all this is in the book. Anyway, so in the morning of the interview with Allison, and she's really famous. So I was a little nervous, I was like, ooh, I was like a little schoolgirl, like being all nervous about going to see this big important person, And so I was nervous, and then I was also nervous of whether or not she was going to get a hold of Isaac and what he'd have to say. So I was kind of nervous all around. Anyway, so I kind of was in the morning, I was talking to my husband and I said, oh, I don't know what to wear because that's how nervous I was. I just couldn't figure out what to do. And I was like looking through my closet and I didn't know what to wear. And I finally was like, no, I can't wear that shirt. I can't wear that shirt. And then my eyes landed on Isaac's hoodie. And I was like, well, of course, duh. And so I put that on. I was like, oh, that's like, feels good. It's like his arms around you. So I felt like, okay, that's definitely the right thing to wear. That had just happened hours before I went and saw her. And she sits me down. She's a super sweet lady. I love her too. She's just awesome. And she has me sit down. She makes you really comfortable right off the bat because she's just a really lovely person. So I just kind of relaxed into the chair and we started chatting. And when she got to Isaac, she goes, the first thing he wants you to know is that you guys were best friends. He's your best friend. You were his person. He loves other people, but you were his person. And I was just like, that's exactly what it was, because it was just that love that's so intense, that soul love. And that was the first thing he wanted me to know, was that we were we were that. And then she goes, and she started laughing, and she goes, and he said he tried to get you to wear his shirt today.
I love it. Like the spirit world knows everything about us, right?
No, and I just put that jacket on. I was like, okay, that's it, man. I mean, and then from there on out through, she spent an hour and a half with me, and everything, honestly, 99% of everything that she said was either dead straight on true or came to happen. A crazy thing that happened during that reading was she goes, you and Isaac could write a book. And at the time I was a nurse. I'm like, what are you talking about? A book? I don't know how to write a book. She said that 4 years ago. And now here we are, the book, here it is. And so everything either she said was true or it came to pass. And so I knew Isaac was alive and well. I knew he was watching over me. I knew I had to pick myself up, dust myself off, and try to help others through that really painful journey, and try to do good with my life, and that it was all going to be okay. And that's it in a nutshell.
I mean, it's just so fascinating. And the fact that you went to see the medium, I think a lot of people, they're afraid of it, they're scared of it, depending on what their background is, their religious beliefs and things like that. But how healing that is to know that that person is perfectly fine and they're not suffering anymore, and they're so eager to let us know that everything is okay. I mean, it's just, I'm so excited, about you going to that, you found your way to a medium and you could have that experience, and then that you wrote this book, basically with Isaac, so that I know there's lots of stories of him coming through to you in different ways. So
Yeah.
is there any other story that you would like to share about, him showing you that he's okay there?
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of them. One of them that was really interesting too was before I went and saw Allison, I had because of the other lady at work that had said, "Hey, you get to go see this medium," and I was at the time I was like, "Okay, everybody keeps telling me to go see one," so I had made this appointment, and it's in the book. And I had made this appointment already. So, and she was a super nice lady. I'd only really seen two mediums, and I got all my questions answered, so I really didn't need to go back. But because all my answers were done. But one of them, the first lady, her name was Tara, and she she gave me a homework assignment because she knew I was in trouble too. And she said, "Listen, it would really be helpful for you to get in touch with Isaac if you can." And I'm like, and at the time I'm like, well, yeah, but he's dead, duh, because I hadn't become aware that he was alive and well on the other side. So I'm just, when you're from that perspective, you're like, well, yeah, but he's dead. So, but anyway, she gave me this little bit of homework, which was fun, and it's a nice meditation. You lay down at night and you you just quiet your brain down. And then to quiet all the noise from the day, you say to yourself the last thing that happened. And then you go backwards until you get to the beginning of the day. So the last thing I did was put my jammies on, and then I got into bed. And before I did that, I was in the shower and blah, blah. And then and then before that, I went to work or whatever. You just kind of go through the day backwards and clear it out so that it's like to get the mouse off the wheel. And then you breathe. And then you close your eyes, and then you imagine yourself in a garden, and you get to choose your own garden because, well, it's your dream and it's your garden. And everybody has their own idea of what their garden would be. And for me, I was like, well, Isaac was so much in love with Japanese this and that and the other thing. So, of course, my garden was Japanese garden. And so I imagine myself walking in the garden and close my eyes, and I'm walking through the garden and I see all the bonsai trees and the rocks and the sculpted rocks and everything. And she says, and then there's going to be a bridge, and there's some water. And the bridge is the meeting point. It's between the planes. It's, where we meet together. You meet him there. He comes down, and that's where you're going to meet. And I said, okay. And so I'm walking through the garden, and there's this little figure on a bridge, and he's feeding the kois because, of course, it's a koi pond. And and my heart like jumps, and I'm like, oh my God, could that be him? That's what I'm thinking. And I like, quicken my pace, and I'm like moving quicker towards him, and he turns around as I step on the bridge, and there's Isaac, and I just run to him and I grab him, and I just can't hold on to him enough. And I said, oh my God, I love you so much, and you've got to help me get through this. And can you please give me a sign? I need something to know that you're here, that you still watching over me, and that I know that you're okay. I just need to know that you're with me. If you could just give me a sign. And it was really funny because right when I did that, and he has these green eyes, and I was looking into his beautiful green eyes as I was telling him this on the bridge. And and then I wake up all of a sudden because my cat jumped up on my chest, and he has these green eyes, and he's looking at me. And I was just like, oh my God. And then I like was startled out of my little meditation. And I was like, okay, that was really crazy, and I kind of just left it alone. Well, later that night, well, I have to put this into perspective of what was going on in my household at the time. My husband had been dead 2.5 years after 2 years after Isaac died. My husband was diagnosed with cancer, and he was on an oxygen machine, and I couldn't sleep with the oxygen machine pounding all night, and I was still a nurse. And so I started sleeping in Isaac's room. And that's why it's important, is because I was alone as I did that meditation. I was in Isaac's room alone on Isaac's bed. And my husband was asleep. I had got him to sleep, and he was fine, and he was doing, everybody was quiet. And so then a little bit later in the night, Chris is dead. Chris is asleep, and all the dogs and the cat is asleep. And then I wake up, and I see this kind of glowing in the hall. And I'm like, what's going on? Because I knew that I turned the light off. And so I got up, and the laundry light had been the motion sensor. There's a motion sensor in the laundry room, and it had been triggered, and it was on, and it was shining into Isaac's room, and everybody was asleep, including me, except I woke up to see the light, literally. And I was just like, oh my God. And then the thing that was really cool is he kept triggering that motion sensor on for the next like 2 years. Very randomly. It was at some points, it was like a few times a day. He just like popped the light on. And that was his kind of go-to, like, I'm here. But the first time, because I asked him for that sign, and that was his go-to way of letting me know that he was around. And that was a really cool one. There was times when Chris and I were talking about, and Chris was, geez, he's a civil engineer, so he's very analytical. So if you can't measure it, it sure don't exist kind of guy,
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so he was definitely much more doubting of the afterlife than I. So his resistance was way up there. So whenever I told him all these crazy things that was happening, he would kind of just look at me like, man, I don't know, my life's going nuts. But then here's the cool thing is things started happening. The things that started happening with me, also he became aware of it, and he stopped guessing me, and because it started happening to him too. And then that was really cool because the first woman that told me to do that meditation, she also said, well, Chris has a really hard time getting messages, because I'd asked her about it. And so she said Isaac has tried to get a hold of him, but he can't, because there's certain things blocking his way. That's not always easy for them to get a hold of you. I mean, they might really try, but there's lots of obstacles that prevent them from getting through sometimes. Certainly one is if you are not open to the idea. But Chris needed to, the woman said, Isaac's going to come through as a hawk. And I told Chris that. And he's like, a hawk, you know? And so it sounds like really cheesy or something like that, you know? And so he's like, yeah, whatever. And and I'm like, well, that's what she said. I'm just telling you what she said as a hawk. And you know, and then the laundry light would go on with me, and he knew that. And then the dream visits. And then here's this really funny thing that happened with him. And so I was at work one day because Chris had, like I said, he got terminal cancer 2 years into after Isaac died. I mean, yeah, after Isaac died. And so then we were battling Chris's health also. It was just so awful. And it was just everything we could do to like just deal with everything that we had on our plates. And I didn't know it at the time, but I think one of Chris's big lessons was to learn that, you know, death wasn't the end before he died. That was a huge gift. But it wasn't an easy gift to give him because it was very resistant. But Isaac was trying, let me tell you. And so I'm at work because I got to work 48 hours a week to keep my insurance because Chris is on my insurance, and cancer at MD Anderson is way expensive. And we were going to MD Anderson every 21 days for 11 months, driving back and forth, back and forth. So this is one of those days where Chris was at home, just taking care of himself because he could get around and that kind of thing fine. And I went to work, and I get home late that evening, and he's like, oh my God, something crazy happened to me. And now he sounds just like me. And it was really funny. And I'm like, okay, what, you know, like, and he was really visibly upset. He was at the kitchen table, and he was like drinking a beer or something like that because he was really upset. And I'm like, what's wrong, you know? And he goes, you're not going to believe this. And he goes, it's I don't know how to say this. You know, he's stumbling on his words and everything. And he said, I went on a ride first on my bike, like I usually do, and then I got home, and then I went across the road to the mailboxes. And when I was getting the mail, and then I started walking home, and a hawk dive bombed me. It just like came so close to me that I had to duck to get out of the way so the hawk didn't hit me. And it ran into a tree and fell on the ground. And he was just like dumbfounded. And then he goes, and then the hawk like came to and flew away. And he goes, and you know, that's just not what hawks do. And I was like, yeah, I never heard of that one myself. Anyway, he was so and then he never questioned me again. And I said, he goes, now I understand. And I said, and he goes, I didn't understand before, but now I do. And now I get it. And by the time he crossed, that was, I think, one of the huge gifts that Isaac gave him while here, was that Chris was not worried about death when he died. He was good to go. And what a great and beautiful gift that is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. You know, and that is, I was going to say that is the best gift anybody can receive, that are, you know, getting ready to cross over to the other side and not have that fear anymore, and know that consciousness is, you're still there. You're still the same person, just without your body.
Right. And so Chris had that by the time, and you know, he was the most resistant between the two of us. And then by the time he passed, he was easy to go. He actually, what I consider a good death. His death was a very good death. He wanted to die at home. I barely got him home from MD Anderson in Houston. I had 6 hours to spare. I got him home. He wanted to die at home. He was with his loved ones, and he wanted me by his side with his dogs, and we got him comfortable, and off he went. And it was really a beautiful death, really. And I thought that was kind of an interesting twist about the book, was because it opens with Isaac's death, where it was just absolute tragedy and horror and pain and terror, and the worst of the worst of the worst as death can be for someone. And then, you know, the other death in the book is a beautiful death. And so really lots of times it's perspective.
No, definitely. And it shows the contrast between the two, and also the growth that you had to go through, like dealing with first your son and then your husband. Um, to go through all those, I mean, it's so difficult, all the grief process in itself, and then find meaning in it, and then learning about the spirit world and connecting to the spirit world. I mean, there's just so many levels of
It's lots of layers, isn't it?
yeah, that you have gone through to find your way. And I know that in the book you talk about the 5 hindrances in Buddhist philosophy in chapter 5, and you introduced a fable based on the 5 hindrances. Can you share the essence of this teaching and how it relates to navigating grief and personal growth?
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful way to, and I'm actually writing that book now. I'm working with a illustrator in Argentina, and we're doing it as a standalone book that is just the fable, and it has just the animals in it. And the reason I really love it is, for one, it's old Buddhist teachings, which are the 5 hindrances. They're kind of like mental obstacles that prevent you to get down your path. They were like roadblocks, basically, that people run into constantly. But when the thing that I learned was that having them just as 5 hindrances, it's like abstract thought. And sometimes it's very hard to grasp onto the concept and the teaching if it's abstract. And so my intention was to bring it down to something that was really easy to identify with. And so doubt, instead of just doubt, now doubt is represented by a mouse, the little teeny mouse, And so I give them a face. Those 5 hindrances, which are doubt, self-doubt. I probably have them around here. I'm sure I can. A sloth and torpor, which is tiredness, to be basically lazy, right? Adversity, which is, oh, I just don't want to do that. Do I have to? Is it difficult? And then monkey mind, which is you're just so busy, you're just always like ding 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 ding. You can never concentrate on anything because you're like, oh, I got to do this, and then you can never concentrate. And then the other one is self-indulgence or pleasure, where you get so caught up in life where it's all about living in the lap of a luxury or comfort. Why do I need to self-examine anything if I'm just sitting on the beach with a tequila sunrise and I can just sit and listen to the waves and everything? And so it becomes a distraction because you don't pursue your deeper goals in your heart. And so those are the 5 hindrances. And they're represented by different animals. The mouse is doubt, and he looks up at the mountain and he's like, oh my gosh, that's so far, I can't go to the top of the mountain. Because the goal is to get to the top of the mountain where you will get peace of heart, clarity of mind. And so but you have to go through the journey. You don't get there if you don't do the work, which is really the basics of anything, whether it's spiritual learning or healing, or you have to put the work in lots of times, right? The grief journey, you do have to put the work in. So the work for the 5 hindrances, the 5 characters, are the mouse, a bobcat, a burrow, a bunny rabbit, and a bighorn sheep, and a red squirrel. And so their goal is to get to the top of the mountain, and where they will get peace of heart and clarity of mind. And so when you have clarity of mind, you don't have to worry about everything anymore. It's like, I was clear of mind that Isaac was alive and well, and now I don't have to worry about it all the time. And so that's the real value, is that you get clarity of mind, for God's sake. That's how valuable is that? It's worth the climb. But certain things get in your way. And so for the mouse, he looks up in the mountain and he's like, oh, I just don't think I can do that. And so that's doubt. And he runs away and he makes a little house under a bush, and he lives there the rest of his life. And the other animals keep going. And then they get to some water, and the donkey, or the burro, he's like, oh, I just don't like to get wet. I don't like to get my feet wet. And so that's adversity. He just doesn't want to do that. So he goes to the meadow and he drinks, he sits there and eats grass all day. And each one of the characters are met with an adversity that they don't want to deal with. the bobcat gets lazy and he takes a cat nap and he forgets about it, and the rabbit gets into this clover field where there's so much clover, and oh my God, she loves clover. I mean, that's her favorite. So is she going to leave there? No, she's going to stay there forever and just eat clover. And so that's, self-indulgence. And so and then the bighorn, and then the red squirrel, she gets to almost to the very top of the mountain. And they get into this field where there's acorn trees and oaks, which with lots of acorns, and pine trees. And she sees all the acorns and she's like, oh my gosh, I gotta go get a bunch of those acorns. And so she's like got the monkey mind, and she's like going from one tree to the other, and she hasn't time to go to the mountain. And so she gets sidetracked with the monkey mind. And bighorn sheep, she really wants to know that question that's been digging at her heart. And so she's not going to be deterred by any of those hindrances. She's going to keep going. So she keeps going. And in the book, I tell it because it pertains to the book, that she wants to know if her son's still alive. And so she gets clarity of mind, knowing that because she knows that even though she's at the top of the mountain, she can't see her son, her little, kid. But she knows in her heart that he's there. And so she has peace of heart and clarity of mind. And so that's really what the fable is about. And I think it's what my goal was, is to put it by putting it with characters that pertain to those hindrances. It's kind of a playful way to tell the story, and it's not oh, you should do this and you should do that and blah blah blah. It's kind of a playful way to go about the importance of not letting your hindrances get in your way of your true path.
I love that. I can't wait for that book to come out. It sounds just wonderful. And I know that we're coming to a close. The time just goes so fast. You have so many, fascinating stories to share with your own journey. What advice would you give to listeners that, may have lost somebody recently?
The advice, really the thing that I learned was that death was not the end. That's really it. Death is the biggest illusion. It's not the end. It's just a piece of being here on earth. And I learned I would never bring Isaac back now. I would not do that because he's free. I'm happy he's free, and I want him to be free. And I need to do the work that I'm supposed to do here and honor that piece of the story that I'm to do. And I want him to be free to do what he's supposed to do. And so, instead of, and it's, of course, you miss them, and it's sad, but if you can take a step back from the pain and then learn what you can from it, rather than just getting consumed by grief, because it can just drag you so far down. Just take a breath and find a way out of the darkness. Don't stay there. You don't want to stay there. That's not the place you need to be. You need to move through it. It's about the processing of it, not to stay there. And so what I learned was death wasn't the end. Isaac had things to do. His time was done. And so I had to learn to say, I'm glad that Isaac's, free, and that I wish him all the best, and I will see him again. And I'm going to honor my time here and do what I need to do, because my work's unfinished and I need to do the work I need to do. So I try to look at it that way rather than just being consumed by the sorrow.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. As difficult as it is to move through grief, but I feel like we all have an incarnation, and it's all perfect in the end. Whenever I ask the spirit world, they always tell me everything is as it should be. And I think that we have a timestamp in a certain way that we came to do something, we came to learn something, and you had some kind of a contract maybe with Isaac and Chris, and you're all supposed to be together for a certain time. And now you're writing this book and you're bringing all this information and sharing your journey with all the other people. And that's part of your gift of what you're learning to be here. So in the end, when you look at it, as tragic as these events can be, but when you look at it from a bird's eye view, it is so divinely guided and such a beautiful journey in the end, if we can just take that step and see it from a little bit of a distance. Now, what do you think, and my last question to you would be, what do you think is the meaning of life?
Getting me a good question there, huh? The meaning of life. Well, I really kind of had to, I can't help but think that they're centered around the life lessons. As annoying as sometimes they are and prickly and difficult and everything, but difficult journeys often give you the best rewards, and so it's okay. I've learned, going through all that, I learned so many great gifts. Like Isaac gave me the gift that I know that death is not the end and that I'll see him again, and that this is a very impermanent thing here, and to learn the things that I've got to learn here. Because boy, when I see that little kid again, man, I want him to say, "That's my mom." I want him to be proud. And so I think for me, that means doing my best with my life here and honoring the contract that I have and learning everything that I can do and be. And so that when I'm done here, that I hopefully did okay.
I love it. Great advice. And how can people learn more about you and find your book?
My website for the book is www.charliebynar.com. And that's where you can find my book. And there's also resources on that website for bereaved parents or bereaved people that have lost loved ones. There's resources that might be helpful, scientific ones, and philosophies and ways to honor your loved ones. So I tried to incorporate in the website some also helpful tools for people, and then also the book's there, and there's a tribute page for bereaved parents that want to make a page for their child. Because one of the things that parents always want to do is they want to say their kids' names, and it's just a thing that we do, and we want to say their name, and so that gives them a space to say their name and honor their kids, and so that's how you can find me.
I love it. And we're going to make sure to put that link in the podcast notes as well, so that people can easily find you and find your book. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the podcast today and sharing your journey with all the listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you.
As we conclude this episode, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for your presence within my community. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, comment, like, and share this podcast episode. Join my free newsletter in the show notes and receive new podcast episodes delivered right to your inbox. If you resonate with the interconnectedness of mind, body, and soul, and are motivated to embark on a journey of personal healing, I invite you to connect with me at drlotte.com. Together, we can pave a path towards transformative healing in your own life.